What if I told you that even with everything going on in the world right now, there might be like a glimmer of hope? And get this, you asked us to do a deep dive on the latest with Russia and Ukraine, so that's where we'll start. But stick with us because this all ties into Iran and their nuclear program too.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack for sure.
Okay, so let's start with Ukraine. Zelensky addressed the UN, right, just the other day, September 25th, and he made some serious accusations against Russia. He's saying that they're gathering intelligence on Ukrainian nuclear power plants. Sounds like he thinks they might be planning attacks.
And he didn't just stop there. He even brought up Chernobyl.
Right.
You know, as a reminder about, about what could happen if a nuclear plant was actually attacked.
Yeah, that's not a great thought, especially with everything that's already happened around Zaporizhia. It's a scary reminder that this isn't just, hypothetical.
Right, which is where the IAEA comes in. They're actually there on the ground at Zaporizhia and other plants in Ukraine, monitoring the situation. They're like the international community's, I guess you could say, eyes and ears, trying to prevent a disaster.
So what can they really do? Can they actually stop an attack if someone decides to go through with it?
Well, that's the thing. It's tricky. They can inspect the plants, write reports, raise the alarm if they have to, but they can't really stop anyone with force.
So they're more like referees than players.
Yeah, exactly. They can blow the whistle, but they can't control what happens on the field.
And in the meantime, Putin's not exactly making things calmer. His rhetoric has been, well, pretty intense.
That statement he made to Russia's Security Council same day as Zelensky's UN address, that was definitely a step up, threatening to think about using nuclear weapons if Russia's attacked, even with conventional weapons. That's a pretty big deal.
So is he bluffing? The articles you shared had some different takes on that.
Right. Some experts think it's a scare tactic, just trying to freak people out so the West doesn't give Ukraine any more powerful weapons.
Like those long-range missiles they've been asking for.
Yeah, exactly. It's like he's watching what the West does and reacting to it.
But some experts seem to think he might actually be serious.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense that he might be feeling trapped, like he's got more to lose by backing down now.
So what does that mean, trapped? What would he actually do?
Well, some think he might try things that are still bad, but not, full-on nuclear war.
Like what?
Think sabotage, cyber attacks, maybe even messing with elections in other countries. Things that could cause chaos without starting a nuclear war.
It's kind of terrifying to think about. A leader feeling that desperate.
And that's the problem. Figuring out what he'll actually do. Is he being strategic or is he desperate? It's hard to say.
And then there are those power plants. It
Yeah.
makes you wonder if those aren't part of his plan somehow. It's like he's holding them hostage.
Right.
Threatening a disaster to get what he wants from the West.
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, are these red lines he keeps mentioning the real deal or not? Even the experts aren't sure.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the bad possibilities. But there was something else in that IAEA interview, something a little more hopeful.
You mean what they said about Iran?
Yeah. It was kind of weird to hear about diplomacy with Iran right in the middle of all this other stuff.
It does make you think. But it was interesting what the IAEA president said about a change in Iran's attitude toward their nuclear program.
He even said turning point, didn't he?
He did. And both Iran's new foreign minister and their president have said similar things, like they actually want to work with the IAEA now.
Well, that's good. But I've heard that before, Iran's not exactly known for keeping promises.
It's true, they haven't always been totally honest in the past.
And the IAEA knows that, right? That IAEA president didn't seem fooled.
Oh, yeah, he definitely made it clear that they're watching Iran very carefully. There are still issues like those traces of enriched uranium they found. That's not nothing.
So it's like they're both being careful, seeing if they can trust each other this time.
Exactly. But just imagine for a second, what if this really is a turning point with Iran? What if they actually start being transparent about their nuclear program?
Okay, let's say they do. Then what?
Well, it might change things between Russia and the West, too,
How so?
Well, think about it. Russia and the West totally disagree about Ukraine. But they both want to stop Iran from getting nukes. They've both been involved in those talks, even with everything else going on.
So if Iran behaves, maybe Russia and the West could, work together, find some common ground.
It could happen. If they can cooperate on one thing, even something as complicated as Iran, it might open the door for them to talk about other stuff.
So instead of, constantly fighting, there's a chance they might actually cooperate.
Maybe. And they both have interests in the Middle East, like oil and keeping things stable, so that cooperation could be a really big deal.
Well, okay, so we've gone from almost a nuclear war to a chance for peace, just like that. That's a lot to think about.
It really is. It shows you how connected everything is, you know? Ukraine, Iran, it's all part of the same big, messy picture.
And understanding that big picture is like super important if we want to understand what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. You can't just look at the headlines. You have to understand what's behind them, what the motivations are, what could happen because of them.
So where does that leave us, the people trying to, live our lives with all this going on?
Yeah.
So it's like we're at this point where things could go either way, right?
Yeah.
Ukraine could get worse, maybe even with those power plants, or things could calm down, maybe even with Iran.
It really is a balancing act. And the important thing is to stay aware, not get discouraged, but also be realistic about what's happening.
So what are we supposed to do?
Mm.
It's easy to feel helpless when it's all so big.
People ask me that a lot, and it makes sense. It is overwhelming. But even small things can make a difference. It starts with just knowing what's going on, understanding the issues.
Which is what we're trying to do, this deep dive, right?
Yeah,
Make sense of it all.
exactly. And when you get that, when you see the connections, you can start making different choices in your own life.
Like what can people actually do?
Well, think about the energy you use. Could you maybe use less, be less dependent on the stuff that, might be funding these conflicts?
And we're not just saying turn off the lights here. We're talking about bigger choices.
Right.
Like what kind of car you drive, what companies you support.
Right. And what about your investments? Are you supporting companies that share your values?
It's easy to forget that these global things affect us too, even here, like gas prices or what happens to our money.
Totally. That's why you have to pay attention, stay informed, and ask questions. What our leaders decide affects all of us.
So it's not just about knowing stuff, it's about doing something with that knowledge.
But it's our responsibility to ourselves, to everyone, even people in the future. We have to be informed, hold our leaders accountable, and try to make the world better.
That's pretty powerful.
It's true. The future isn't set in stone. We make it what it is.
Well said. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of another deep dive. We covered a lot from Ukraine to Iran and even some hope along the way.
It's been great talking about all this, and I hope everyone keeps thinking about it, reading about it, and never stops being curious.
Because, like we saw today, you never know what's going to happen. The more you know, the better you'll be no matter what.
Couldn't agree more.
So thanks for joining us for this deep dive. If you want to learn more, we've got links to all those articles in the show notes. And until next time, stay curious.